What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the Devy YouTube channel. Today, we're talking Devy risers and fallers. Who are some guys in college football that rose up value and who have declined? We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. We're going to be looking at dynasty rankings and combined dynasty Devy rankings. Where are these guys getting valued right now? Who are some guys that you can move them for? What does their trade value look like? So not only are we doing rising and falling, we're looking at player value. So we're going to get into this. We're going to be looking at, hey, who are those guys that you should be targeting out there in your leagues? And hey, who had a good year or a good day? Let's talk about Quinn Ewers. He had a hell of a day for my not Texas Longhorns. I have the Michigan Wolverines, as many of you know, but he whooped our ass, right? 24 for 36, 246 yards, 3 touchdowns. Quinn looked very, very good. And I think the big thing for him is that he improved under pressure. You saw that. He was able to step up, make the throws when he needed. Good touch on a lot of his balls. And when you look at his PFF grades for the year, 82.8. Big time throws is 2. I think the big number that stands out to me is the turnover worthy play throws. When you're looking at turnover worthy passes, 0. A.6.2 NFL rating is there. I thought he led his team to a very, very big win on the road, a game that I don't know if he wins the last couple of years. I know he won out of Alabama, but with that defense, he made Michigan's defense, who is a very top 5 defense in my opinion still, look like children out there. And I thought that he had good balance. I thought that he read the field well, he processed well. So shout out Quinn Ewers, because I think that he rose up more than anybody. I think when you're looking at it from a ranking standpoint, he's pushing for that QB1 in the 25 class. I know some people are still talking about Shador, some of these other guys, Carson Beck, but why not Quinn? If Quinn can continue to do this, he does this against Georgia. That'll be the big test for him as a quarterback. Why not him be the QB1 in the 25 class? When you're talking about consensus rankings right now, and these are consensus rankings at the Devy. Some people have a little bit higher or lower. Right now, we have Carson Beck as QB1, Jackson Arnold, Nico at 2 and 3, and then Quinn Ewers is there at 4. We still have Arch at 5, and then Drew Allers kind of moved his way up. But Quinn is still sitting there in that top 5. He's moved his way up into that top 5, and to be honest, he might be ahead of Carson Beck. I think there are some things in Carson Beck's game that are kind of concerning. I think that we're going to see as the season goes. But to me, right now, based on profile and production, Quinn's had a better year than Carson Beck. So it would not shock me to see those things flipped or even lower for Carson Beck as we get through it. As far as like trade value out there, guys, he's going around, how I would value him to a dynasty asset, he's still a question mark, right? He's still not a first-round quarterback. I think he's in there with Derek Carr, Justin Fields. However, Justin Fields did not look amazing this first week as he got the start because Russell Wilson was injured. But in that range, the Bo Nix, Aaron Rodgers, and the only reason why I say he's in that Bo Nix range is because Bo Nix got drafted in the first. You're hoping that happens for Quinn, and I think he will. Now, would I trade Quinn Ewers for Bo Nix? Probably not. That's why I have him a little higher. But just in general, this is kind of in the quarterback value. This is where I would value Quinn Ewers at. Now, remember, if he is the number 1 pick, he's going to go top 20 in the dynasty rankings because that's just how we do these things. But I would say right now, this is where they get valued. If you need a QB2 on that side, I know Derek Carr had a good game today when you're thinking of like from a fantasy perspective. But this is generally speaking where I think his flourish, middle of his ceiling is his value, but you maybe could get higher. Just test the market. It all depends on that market out there. A guy that really believes in Quinn Ewers. Now, next guy that kind of went out, and I like to go off the board a little bit, Jordan Moore. I'm a big Moore guy from Duke. I think he's a very, very good slot receiver. That's probably what he's going to play. He had a really good game against Northwestern. 11 catches, 121 yards, and a touchdown. From his PFF grades this year, 74.1 receiving grade, 3.3 yards per route run's not amazing, but his ADOT, 15.3. Drops only 1, missed tackles forced. To me, Jordan and a couple of these other guys we're going to talk about today, they're interesting players in terms of fantasy because I do think that, hey, they can find that role, 4th, 5th round guy. Hey, can create separation, can just catch everything. And Jordan Moore has done that pretty consistently in his career. I think the big thing with Moore is older prospect, right? Jay Stein's going to hate him. Analytics aren't going to love this kid, but he is a baller. He can step up. He gets in the slot. He's versatile. I think he does. He can play outside in college. I don't know how much that translates well over the NFL range, but just want to shout him out. Hell of a game, kid. You played well. And he's just a guy to kind of keep watch on as we move through this process. Now, next kid, Ricky White. And Ricky White's a guy that I've liked for 2 or 3 years. I really wish he would have freaking came out of school last year, though, because I love Ricky White. Last year coming out. Now he's an older prospect, right? We talked about those older prospects as we go through it, but still only a 4-year kid, right? So he's still not that 5th-year wide receiver that we're used to seeing. 6'1", 190, had a pretty good year last year, had 1,400 yards receiving, 8 touchdowns. That's why I wanted to come out. Had a down game in week 1, but it bounced back, right? He had 5 catches, 111 yards, those 3 touchdowns. He averaged 22 yards a catch in this week 2. When you look at his PFF grades, 82.0 receiving grade, ADOT 18.4, definitely gets push the ball downfield. He is that deep threat here. And I love his ability to take the top off of defenses. And I think that's one thing the NFL is going to like about him, his ability to take the top off of defenses. He's a big play threat. It'll be interesting to see what his 40 is, because I do think he's a blazer. Like, I think he can get that 4.4. If he can do that, he can rise up boards. I don't care how old he is. I don't care what that production looks like. If he can test well, especially that 40, and be a deep play threat, we see how the NFL likes these guys. That's going to be an option for them. Now, another kid that I'm so excited for, because I love Nick Singleton, right? Nicholas Singleton is a kid that, had a down year last year. We've talked about him a lot here on the channel. We've talked about, a lot of people have talked about him, right? We said, hey, how's he going to bounce back? How's it going to look this year? And when you see it, he's had 2 very, very solid games. Now, this week, I thought it was very good when you're looking at, like, Penn State struggled a little bit against Bowling Green. But 119 yards and a touchdown last week, 114 yards and a touchdown. He also had a receiving touchdown against Bowling Green. So those are the things that you like, right? He had a 41-yard touchdown in this game. Looks explosive, right? So 10 plus runs of 10 yards or more with 6. Elusive rating over that 100 mark, which we really like to see there. Missed tackles forces 5. Great job there. And yards after contact. I think one thing that I've noticed about him is his ability to run inside has improved, right? That was kind of the knock on him. At his size, man, 6 foot, 225, 230 in that range. Why are you struggling running inside? And he hasn't done that as much. I think he's inside out runner right now. He's very confident in that, and he hasn't had a lot of carries, but he's efficient with them. He's had that production that you like to see. He's looked really good. So shout out Nicholas Singleton. And when you look at the running back rankings right now, in terms of this class, we still have Travion and Quinshawn at 1-2, and maybe we're too low on like Ashton and Nolly. They're right there as well. I think when you're looking at the 25 class, there's a lot of guys that we could be talking about in this range, right? There's a lot of guys on this show today. We're going to be talking about the running back class. Next couple guys that are like, wow, maybe they'll bounce up too. But that's where kind of Quinshawn's at, or excuse me, where Nicholas Singleton's at, right behind Quinshawn Judkins, right behind Henderson. But if he continues to have a really, really good season, an efficient year, as long as he test wells at that size, I mean, if he's a day 2 guy, you're really happy with him in this Devy format, because I do think that he can be an NFL guy and a 3-down guy. I think that he can catch, as you saw in 2023. Now, as far as his trade value, we kind of have him around this in our consensus rankings. If you want we basically have over 1,000 players ranked from Dynasty to Devy combined to kind of give you an idea of trade value, along with our trade calculator over on our Patreon. You can check that out below. But here's where we kind of have them. Alvin Kamara, Brian Robinson, Singleton, Javonte, and Jalen Warren. Now, those aren't running back 1, right? That's just where he's kind of ranked. The top guy is Kamara in that tier. You have Brian Robinson, Singleton, Javonte, and Jalen Warren. I think that's appropriate value for him, right? I wouldn't mind moving Brian for Nicholas Singleton. I like Brian, as you guys know, if you watch the channel enough. I've talked about him enough. Kamara, same thing. Javonte, Jalen in that category. I think Singleton fits in that range. So if you're looking for him, if you're a rebuilding team, and maybe you can ship off Javonte for Nicholas Singleton to a contender, I wouldn't mind doing that, I think, based on what he's done the first couple weeks of the season. Another guy I want to talk about as being a riser, Jam Miller. Man, he's one of those guys I think has risen up a lot. We talked about him on the podcast. I said, 8th, 9th round value. 15 attempts, 140 yards, and a touchdown, this last week for Alabama. He looks good. And I think the thing with Jam is that he's just an efficient runner, right? He's like Brian Robinson. I know you use that comp a lot. He just, because they played at Alabama, they really remind me of each other there. He just looked good. PFF run grade, 82.8, yards after contact, 90, missed tackles for his 5, has enough explosive running style to get those 10 plus yards at 4, elusive rating over 100, which you like to see there. Leaned on him a little bit against USF late, and you like to see that as well. The receiving upside is not going to be there, right? So we're thinking 3-down guy. We're thinking, what can he do there? I think he's a good pass blocker, but from a catching standpoint, not in his game. But if he stays out there, maybe that doesn't matter, right? Similar to like Brian Robinson. That's why I kind of bring him up a lot. Now, next guy here that we're looking at, Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, is a player that we need to kind of be aware of, right? 20 attempts this last week, 132 yards and 2 touchdowns against NC State, is in the class of 25. And like I said, the class of 25 has some very, very solid running backs. It's very deep and it's solid. I love that. I love what they've kind of done with this class. I like how they've kind of risen up the boards here. Yards after contact this year, 145, 80.2 run grade right now through the season, through the 2 games, 7 missed tackles for us, 10 plus runs of 7 each. And he's looked explosive, right? When you watch Dylan out there, he does very good. And I think the thing with him is this offense predicates those open zones. I think they do a good job of spreading the defense apart, and he can explode through the line. So that's what you like about Dillon as well. And the elusive rating, man, 190.8. He's been elusive. He is their running back one. And when you're looking at it from that perspective heading the season, there was some question marks whether he was going to be that running back one, but no question marks now. Dylan Sampson's the running back one of this team. And I do think that he's one of those players that you're going to watch in the 25 class kind of rise up if you continue to do so. Now, if we're going to talk about fallers, I only have one because it's really hard at the beginning of the year to really say fallers, right? We talked about Quentin Johnson a couple years ago. We talked about these guys that, like, they didn't perform early. Luther Burden could be another category of a guy like that this year. Hey, he's scoring some touchdowns, but the production's not really there. Like, it's hard to, like, just pinpoint fallers all the time. Last week, I know we talked about Donovan Edwards, and I think that's warranted based on even his play against Texas, which wasn't great. But mine is Preston Stone, because I think a lot of people came into the season thinking he could be a dark horse at that quarterback position. But this last week, after the BYU loss, 2 for 4, 4 yards. He got sacked a bunch of time. He had over negative 30 yards rushing, interception, then he got benched. And from a guy that maybe was some people's preseason favorite as like a sleeper at the quarterback position to go to getting benched and his team losing to BYU and almost losing Nevada. You know, I was at the Nevada game. Preston Stone did not look good in that game. He made a couple throws where you're like, hey, there's talent there. But I mean, I think he's a big loser in this just because of the fact that, hey, you know, he got benched in it like this. And if you draft him in Devy, that's a death sentence for Devy quarterbacks. Getting benched like that, especially heading into their year where they can be actually draft eligible. Preston Stone's just a struggle. I think if he gets back out there, he might, but I just don't love kind of where they're at as a team right now. I do not love kind of how that offense looks, and it's a really bad look for him moving forward. So Preston Stone's my one faller here. But again, like I mentioned, you know, when I talked about the Devy draft, if you wouldn't check that out, you know, don't be overreactionary the first few weeks. You know, I think there's trends that you can find and there is movement you can make, especially the running back position. But, you know, see where that value's at, see where that's why I think our Patreon is really good, where we have our combined rankings. We're doing a huge upload this week and it'll already be done by the time you watch this video. And we're going to be looking at the Dynasty Devy value. And that's why we have the trade calculator to help you move. Because in Devy, you're always trading, trade to collect assets and get as many as you can. That's why we try to kind of help you guys out with that area, because I know it can be tough trading in Devy League. So appreciate you guys. I'll check you guys next week.